sort of a mixed bag, I would say, in the jobs numbers. What do you take away from them?
I don't think it was a green light or a red light for the Fed. The numbers certainly didn't show hugely pronounced weakness, but if you were concerned by the recent trend in the statistics, they certainly didn't give you a clean bill of health for the economy. So I think because of the weakness, it's looking like a closer call for 25 versus 50 in September than was my guess a month or two ago. I don't think it's ultimately very important.
Larry, one of the things that's been in the news a lot this week has been the proposed transaction of Nippon Steel buying U.S. Steel. We have both candidates speaking on this. Kamala Harris has come out very strongly this week on it, something you've addressed before. In the law, we talk about hard cases making bad law. Is this hard politics potentially making bad trade policy?
You know, hard cases have to make bad law. Easy cases should not make bad law and should not set terrible precedents. This is not something that should be brought to final resolution in a heated political climate. Of course, there's going to be skirmishing between the different parties, the union, the potential acquirer, the incumbent company, about just what the terms of any deal are going to be. That's what happens in these things. But there is, on the basis of everything I know, no legitimate national security or reasonable economic rationale for the prevention of this deal. Indeed, I believe that this deal will strengthen our national security by generating a far larger infusion of capital into the U.S. steel industry than would otherwise be possible. I believe that it will favor broad U.S. competitiveness by providing for lower cost steel as an input to key American industries like automobiles, with the whole automobile industry favoring this deal. And they have a huge stake in reliable, inexpensive steel as an input. And I believe strengthening our connections with Japan and with a major Japanese company is also strengthening our broad national position and the position of American corporations in the world. But to stop this, or to embrace the principle that somehow these specific steel companies need to have an American owner, would be to make a grave error and throw out large amounts of U.S. tradition. And the irony is that I, as someone who grew up in Pennsylvania, have pretty high confidence, there are no certainties, but pretty high confidence that the state of Pennsylvania will be prosperous and with more employment opportunities if that cash is infused into U.S. steel than if this deal is blocked.
Larry, it wasn't just about Nippon Steel that we heard from the candidates this week. We also heard a fair amount on economic policy. We heard more from Vice President Kamala Harris. We also had the former president, Donald Trump, come to the Economic Club in New York and set out a lot of different ideas. Start with Donald Trump. You haven't always been supportive of his economic policies. Did you hear anything you sort of liked?
Look, I think his instinct that there are places where we have excessive regulation and where we need to be able to do things faster and more vigorously, I think that's a legitimate instinct, and I think that's important. It's something that's longstanding. Bill Clinton and Al Gore used to talk about reinventing government. Do I think that having Elon Musk advise on reforming government procedures is likely to be an effective strategy, or a strategy that's free of all sorts of conflicts of interest? I think that's pretty unlikely to work out very well. And this idea that the U.S. should set up some kind of sovereign wealth fund that will be allocated by the president, I guess, I think at best you'd have to grade that one incomplete because not fully fleshed out. It's one thing if you're Norway or the Emirates that has this huge natural resource that's going to run out that you're exporting to accumulate a big wealth fund. But we've got a big trade deficit. We've got a big budget deficit. Hard to believe that setting aside lots of funds for unspecified investments made in unspecified ways where you don't even know what it's going to be called is a particularly responsible kind of proposal.
So, Larry, go to the other side here with Vice President Kamala Harris. We heard from her particularly on things like capital gains, some small business concessions and things. One question is, do those proposals make sense? Another is, are they big enough to actually move the needle in this economy?
Look, I think what the Vice President has said has been far more responsible, and I think her demonstrated willingness to move in the general direction that President Biden moved is appropriate. I welcomed her shading away from some of the things that had been in the Biden budget on capital gains. I think there's probably more adjustment that would ideally be necessary. To my mind, the idea of taxing unrealized capital gains is an academic non-starter in the practical world, and I wish she had eased away from that as well. But I think she sent an important signal there. I would like to see her, as I would like to see President Trump, frankly, be more focused on our looming fiscal crisis. I'd like to see them be more focused on our defense industrial base and the set of issues bringing together national security and economic policy. But I want to be very clear that there's a vast difference in the quality of the policies and the economic prospects for the country as I judge them between the two candidates.